In the harsh Arizona territory of 1873, where survival meant choosing sides, Mercy Freeman, a black waitress struggling to keep her small cafe open, faces daily harassment from a town built on stolen Navajo land. When she risks everything to save a wounded Navajo warrior, she unknowingly creates an alliance that threatens the railroad's expansion plans and the town's racial order. With her establishment burned to ashes and 200 warriors at her back, Mercy must now decide if her grandmother's hidden heritage is destiny or burden. Dawn broke over Goodwater, Arizona territory. No birds sang. Only the soft creaking of leather and metal as 200 Navajo warriors lined the town's main street on horseback. Mercy Freeman stood alone on her cafe porch. The morning sun caught the sheen of sweat on her dark skin. Behind her, the frightened whispers of townspeople. Before her, warriors with expressionless faces, weapons visible but not drawn. Marshal Jenkins stepped forward, rifle clutched white-knuckled in his hands. "This is your one warning. Turn back now." The warriors remained still as stone. Reverend Whitaker pushed through the gathering crowd. "We won't have savages in our Christian town." His voice carried more fear than conviction. A young settler, at the edge of the crowd, raised his shotgun. His hands trembled. The gun discharged with a crack that split the morning silence. Time stopped. 200 bows tensed, 20 settler rifles aimed. Children clutched mothers' skirts. The world balanced on a knife edge. A commanding voice cut through the tension. The line of warriors parted as a man rode forward on a painted horse, Chief Manuelito, his face weathered like the mountains beyond, his eyes fixed not on the armed settlers but on Mercy. "The woman who saved my nephew deserves to choose," he said in clear English that surprised the townspeople. "Will you have peace or war today?" Every eye turned to Mercy Freeman. The fate of Goodwater rested on her next words. 1 week earlier, Mercy had scrubbed tables in Freeman's place with raw hands. The only black-owned business in town struggled against invisible barriers. Townsfolk who entered often left without paying. Others spit on her doorstep when they passed. The cafe walls held memories. Her husband, James, lost to Tennessee night riders 5 years ago. Their dream of a place where anyone could sit and eat with dignity. The long journey west where she thought prejudice might thin like air at altitude. It hadn't. She wiped sweat from her brow as Miss Abigail entered. The elderly schoolteacher was one of her few regular customers. "They're cutting rates at Porter's restaurant again," Miss Abigail warned, settling at her usual table. "That man won't rest until you're gone." Mercy nodded, refilling the woman's coffee cup. "He'll wait a long time." Thomas Jang slipped in the back door, his railroad worker's clothes dusty from the day's labor. At 23, his face already showed lines from years squinting against sun and dynamite flash. "Brought you these?" He placed 3 rabbits on her counter. "Boss says the railroad men are celebrating tonight. Big news coming." "What news?" Thomas lowered his voice. "Government-approved new track, right through Navajo hunting grounds." A gust of wind rattled the door. The sky darkened as dust clouds gathered on the horizon. Mercy watched Edgar Porter stroll past her window, tipping his hat mockingly. His restaurant across the street bustled, with customers. The storm hit with sudden fury. Wind screamed through every crack in the weathered building. Mercy bolted the door against the stinging dust. No customers would brave this weather. The pounding started as darkness fell. Not wind. A fist on wood. Mercy approached cautiously, shotgun in hand. The door shuddered with another impact. She cracked it open against the howling wind. A man collapsed inward. Blood matted his long black hair. His breaths came shallow and quick. Navajo. She dragged him inside and barred the door. His wounds spoke of violence, not accident. A deep knife slash across his ribs, bullet graze on one arm. She should call the marshal. Town law required reporting. Indians within city limits. The penalty for harboring was steep. Her cafe could be seized. The man's eyes fluttered open, met hers, then closed again. His arm fell limp, revealing a spiral scar on his forearm. The pattern struck her like lightning. Her grandmother's voice echoed across years. Your grandfather wore this mark, the sign of his clan, the people I left behind. Mercy made her decision. She dragged the unconscious man into her storeroom just as boots crunched on her porch. Marshall, Jenkins entered in a swirl of dust, looking around suspiciously. Thought I saw someone head this way. Just me, Marshall. She gestured to her empty cafe. Hunting party found Navajo tracks heading toward town. His hand rested on his gun. Probably scouts for a war party. Seen anything? No, sir. Storm's keeping everyone away tonight. His eyes narrowed. Better hope it stays that way. Railroad's bringing important men tomorrow. Any trouble with Indians, and the army'll sweep this whole territory clean. After he left, Mercy returned to the storeroom. The wounded man hadn't moved. She cleaned his wounds with water and whiskey, packed them with herbs her grandmother had taught her to use. Through the night, she kept vigil. Near dawn, he woke with a start, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Easy, she said softly. You're safe. He assessed her through pain-narrowed eyes. Who? Mercy Freeman. This is my place. Town. His English came halting but clear. Goodwater. You're hurt bad. What's your name? He hesitated. Little Hawk. The marshal's looking for you. Fear flashed across his face, quickly masked. Must go. Papers. Important. You'll bleed to death. She pressed him back down as he tried to rise. His hand closed around her wrist with surprising strength. White men. Plan to poison water. Canyon Creek. Must warn Chief. Poison? The words chilled her. Canyon Creek fed both the town and the Navajo lands beyond. A wagon rattled past outside. Little Hawk tensed. Hide me or turn me in. Choose now. Mercy thought of her husband, of promises made, of the grandmother who spoke of Navajo blood in their veins, of the cafe that stood as her only security in a hostile world. She made the second life-changing decision in one night. I'll hide you, but you need strength first. For 3 days, Little Hawk recovered in her storeroom. She fed him, changed his bandages, kept him hidden during business hours. At night, he told her about Chief Manuelito's resistance against relocation, about sacred lands stripped away year by year. She shared fragments of her own story. The terror of the night riders, her grandmother's whispered heritage, the cafe, built from nothing but determination. On the 4th morning, she found the storeroom empty. Little Hawk had vanished with his recovered documents. In his place lay a turquoise necklace, a gift or payment. She wasn't sure which. That same morning, Edgar Porter led Railroad Baron Hargrove into her cafe uninvited. Hargrove surveyed the humble space with contempt. So this is the colored establishment, he said to Porter, as if Mercy weren't standing right there. Quaint. Shame it won't suit the town's new character once development begins. Porter smiled thinly. Progress waits for no one. After they left, Mercy found a notice nailed to her door. New health regulations. Effective immediately. The inspection fee alone would empty her savings. Now, a week later, she stood facing Chief Manuelito and 200 warriors. Behind her, the frightened town waited for her answer. Mercy thought of Little Hawk, of her grandmother's stories, of the poison plot at Canyon Creek, of a lifetime making hard choices alone. I choose peace, she said clearly. The tension held for 1 heartbeat. 2. Then Chief Manuelito dismounted. Mercy stepped aside, gesturing toward her cafe door. The chief nodded and entered. One by one, the townspeople lowered their weapons. One by one, the warriors relaxed their bows. Inside, Chief Manuelito spoke without preamble. My nephew says you saved his life. I did what anyone should do. No. His weathered hand touched the turquoise at her throat. You did what few would dare. The town wants us gone. The railroad brings soldiers to force us out. But you, standing alone, chose differently. Little Hawk appeared in the doorway. His wounds had healed cleanly. He nodded to Mercy with newfound respect. We offer alliance, the chief continued. Protection for your place, Trade for your table. Marshal Jenkins pushed through the doorway. This is insanity. These people can't just... My cafe, Mercy interrupted. My choice. She extended her hand to the chief. I accept your offer. Outside, warriors and townspeople watched through windows as a black cafe owner and a Navajo chief shook hands over a scarred wooden table. The first tremors of change rippled through Goodwater like wind across desert sand. Word spread through Goodwater like wildfire. The black waitress had made a pact with the Navajo. Some called it treason, others, opportunity. Freeman's place transformed overnight. Navajo women brought hand-woven blankets to trade for meals. Warriors stood sentinel, nearby their presence keeping Porter's men at bay. For the first time, Mercy's ledger showed black ink instead of red. Little Hawk came most days, serving as translator. He watched Mercy with quiet intensity when she wasn't looking. She pretended not to notice. My uncle asks if you would teach some of our women your language, he said one evening as she closed the cafe. They wish to trade directly in town. Mercy wiped her hands on her apron. I've never taught anyone anything. You taught me to trust. The words hung between them, simple and weighty. She agreed to the lessons. Twice, weekly, Navajo women gathered in her kitchen after hours. They brought their children, their laughter, their determination to learn. In exchange, they showed Mercy how to weave, to identify desert plants, to speak phrases in their language. Miss Abigail joined as a second teacher. The elderly woman had taught slaves to read in secret before the war. Now she watched with satisfaction as another barrier crumbled. Baron Hargrove summoned Marshal Jenkins to the railroad office. The room smelled of cigar smoke and ambition. This situation with the Indian lover is unacceptable, Hargrove said, not looking up from his papers. The Secretary of Interior visits next month to finalize water rights. I need those savages back on their reservation by then. Jenkins shifted uncomfortably. Freeman has broken no laws. The trading is peaceful. Hargrove's eyes hardened. Then perhaps the laws need adjusting. New ordinances appeared the following day. No public gatherings after sundown. Special permits required for non-resident commerce. Health inspections, weekly instead of monthly. Mercy paid the fees. Followed the rules. The cafe thrived despite them. Each new restriction seemed to bring more customers. Townspeople curious about the Navajo goods. Travelers hearing rumors of a place where different peoples broke bread together. Porter watched from across the street, his restaurant increasingly empty. His hatred festered like a wound gone bad. Thomas brought warning on a Tuesday. He slipped through the back door after midnight, his eyes darting nervously. Hargrove's men were talking. Something about Canyon Creek again. They didn't see me listening. Mercy had found her grandmother's journal hidden beneath a floorboard. Its pages spoke of a Navajo medicine man who had loved a runaway slave woman. Of a child born of that union. Of promises broken and kept. The documents Little Hawk carried, she said. They mentioned poisoning the water. Could that still be their plan? Thomas nodded grimly. The railroad needs water rights. If the creek runs foul, the Navajo will be forced to relocate. The town will have no choice but to accept railroad control of the new wells. Little Hawk arrived before dawn with Chief Manuelito. The old leader studied the journal pages by lantern light, his finger tracing the spiral clan mark that matched the scar on Little Hawk's arm. Your blood remembers, he said to Mercy, even when your mind was not told. The chief pointed to a map Thomas had drawn. Canyon Creek feeds our lands, but also this town. Hargrove would poison his own people? Some men burn their own house to collect insurance, Thomas said bitterly. A plan formed in whispers. Thomas would continue gathering information from the railroad camp. Little Hawk would warn the scattered Navajo families near the creek. Mercy would keep up appearances, watching for signs of when Hargrove might act. None of them saw Porter watching from the shadows outside her window. The following evening brought more customers than usual. Railroad workers, townsfolk, Navajo traders all crowded the cafe. Mercy and two Navajo women worked the kitchen while Little Hawk helped serve. Thomas entered, his face tight with urgency. He caught Mercy's eye, nodded toward the storeroom. Something had changed. Before she could reach him, Porter walked through the front door, flanked by Marshal Jenkins and 2 deputies. "Evening, gentlemen," Mercy said calmly. "Table for 4? Jenkins looked pained. "Miss Freeman, we have reports of illegal trading and conspiracy occurring on these premises." The room fell silent. "My customers come to eat," she replied. "What they discuss over coffee isn't my concern." Porter stepped forward. "What about what your Chinese friend discusses with Hargrove's competition?" He pointed to Thomas in the corner. "He was seen passing information to Northern Pacific men yesterday." Thomas froze. Every eye turned to him. "That true?" Jenkins asked. The young man's shoulders slumped. "Not like he says." Little Hawk moved protectively toward Thomas, but Mercy caught his arm. A wrong move now could shatter everything. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," she suggested. "Nothing private about treason," Porter spat. "This Chinaman's been playing both sides, selling railroad secrets while pretending to be your friend." Thomas looked directly at Mercy. "I needed to know their plans, all of them. Northern Pacific offered access if I shared what I knew about the southern route." "So you admit to industrial espionage," Jenkins said. "I admit to discovering Hargrove plans to dynamite Canyon Creek tomorrow at dawn." Thomas's voice carried through the stunned room. "He'll dam the lower flow, blame it on a natural rock slide. The upper waters will be poisoned with mining waste. He'll claim the Navajo did it." Silence hung heavy as cemetery dirt. A railroad worker stood. "My family drinks that water." "As does mine," added a shopkeeper. Porter's face reddened. Lies from a foreign saboteur. "Why would I lie?" Thomas asked simply. "I have no stake in this land, but I've seen what men like Hargrove did to my people in California, how they poisoned our wells when we refused to leave." Outside, a lantern shattered against the cafe wall. Flames licked up the dry wood siding. "Fire!" someone shouted. Chaos erupted. People pushed toward exits. Smoke filled the room with alarming speed. Little Hawk pulled Mercy toward the back door, but she broke away. "My grandmother's journal." She fought through the thickening smoke to her small bedroom. The floorboard came up easily. Journal secured, she turned to flee. A beam crashed down behind her. The exit disappeared behind a wall of flame. Strong. Arms wrapped around her waist. Little Hawk. He dragged her through the kitchen's service entrance as the roof began to collapse. They stumbled into the alley. All around, townspeople formed bucket lines. Too late. The cafe burned like a funeral pyre, sending embers spiraling into the night sky. Porter's voice rose above the commotion. "See what comes of consorting with savages. They've brought destruction to our town." Several settlers murmured in agreement. The fragile peace wavered. Chief Manuelito arrived with warriors. Their faces reflected the flames, impassive yet dangerously still. "We did not do this," the chief stated. "Convenient, you were all outside." "When it started," Porter countered. Thomas pushed through the crowd. "It was Hargrove's men. I saw them running from the alley." Marshal Jenkins assessed the remains of the cafe, the angry faces all around. Fingers itched toward triggers. Bows tensed imperceptibly. Mercy stood between the two groups, her life's work collapsing in flames behind her. The journal clutched. To her chest bore witness to another union broken by hatred. "This fire changes nothing," she declared. "Hargrove still plans to destroy Canyon Creek at dawn. Our water, Navajo water, the lifeblood of every person here." Little Hawk translated her words. The warriors listened, their anger focusing beyond the town. "We ride to stop him," Chief Manuelito decided. "Now." The marshal hesitated. "I can't authorize—" "You can come with us or stand aside," Mercy interrupted. "But we're going." Thomas stepped forward. "I know where the explosives are placed." Little Hawk brought horses. The chief instructed most warriors to remain, protecting the town in their absence. Mercy mounted awkwardly, securing her grandmother's journal inside her shirt. The turquoise necklace felt suddenly heavy around her neck. An inheritance. A responsibility. 3 paths to the canyon, Little Hawk explained as they rode into the darkness. Thomas to warn the town water carriers, my people to alert the scattered camps, you and I to the explosives. The night swallowed them. Behind, the cafe's embers died slowly. Ahead, the eastern sky showed the first pale hint of dawn. The race had begun. They rode hard into the darkness. Hoofbeats punched the earth like heartbeats. Urgent, strained, determined. The canyon appeared as negative space against the stars. A vast wound in the landscape. Mercy felt the horse beneath her tiring. Her hands, unused to the reins, had gone, numb hours ago. Little Hawk signaled a halt at the canyon's edge. Below, moonlight caught the silver thread of Canyon Creek. Their breaths formed small clouds in the pre-dawn chill. The explosives will be at the Narrows, he whispered, where the walls pinched together. They dismounted. Little Hawk took her, hand to steady her. His palm felt rough against hers, warm despite the cold. Neither acknowledged the touch that lingered seconds too long. A twig snapped. Little Hawk pushed Mercy behind an outcropping as lantern light bobbed in the distance. Hargrove's men, setting charges earlier than expected. We need to split up, Little Hawk decided. I'll create a distraction west. You approach from the east where the path is wider. Mercy clutched her grandmother's journal. I don't know how to disarm explosives. Cut the wires. Without connections, the powder is just dust. Little Hawk pressed a knife into her hand. Stay low. Move when they move to mask your sound. He melted into the shadows before she could protest. Mercy crept forward, hugging the canyon wall. Her dark skin made her nearly invisible against the rock, a blessing inherited from ancestors who had needed to move unseen through hostile territories. The voices of Hargrove's men carried on the still air, 3 of them, placing bundles at intervals along the narrowest part of the creek. Their lanterns created islands of light surrounded by perfect darkness. A wolf howl echoed from the western ridge, then another. The men paused their work. Wolves don't hunt in pairs, one said nervously. A stone clattered down the western slope. Little Hawk's distraction. Check it out, ordered a gruff voice. Could be those Navajo scouts we heard about. 2 men moved west, leaving one to guard the explosives. Mercy inched closer. The remaining man stood with his back to her, rifle ready as he peered after his companions. 20 feet. 10. The sentry shifted his weight from foot to foot. Mercy froze, knife clutched, white-knuckled in her hand. A gunshot cracked from the western ridge, then another. The sentry sprinted toward the sound without a backward glance. Mercy rushed to the nearest explosive bundle. Wires snaked from it to the next charge. She sliced through them with Little Hawk's knife. The second bundle, the third, wire after wire. She had reached the 5th charge when a voice cut through the darkness. Quite the resourceful little trespasser. Baron Hargrove stood on the ledge. Above, a derringer aimed casually at her heart. His fine suit looked incongruous against the rugged landscape. Mr. Hargrove, she acknowledged, straightening slowly. He descended to the creek bed with practiced ease. A man accustomed to getting his hands dirty when necessary. Miss Freeman, or should I say Miss Freeman Begay? He nodded toward the journal tucked in her shirt. Oh yes, I know all about your grandmother's indiscretion with that medicine man. Had my men search your place weeks ago? Mercy's mind raced. Little Hawk might still be alive if the gunshots were his doing. Thomas would bring help eventually. The water serves everyone, she said. Why poison what your own town needs? Hargrove smiled thinly. Progress requires sacrifice. The town will manage with my new wells. At a price, naturally. And the Navajo? Will no longer have reason to remain. He gestured to the final explosive charges she hadn't reached. These will collapse the canyon walls. Tragic natural disaster. The upper creek will be tainted by my copper mine's runoff within days. Movement. On the ridge caught Mercy's eye. Thomas, and behind him, townspeople with rifles and lanterns. Too far to help yet. She needed to stall. You'd poison children for profit. I'd secure the future of the territory for civilization. Hargrove checked his pocket watch. The charges are set to detonate at sunrise. I suggest you make peace with your mixed heritage in the time remaining. It's my mixed heritage that helps me see through men like you. She clutched the turquoise at her throat. My grandmother chose love across boundaries. My grandfather chose compassion over tradition. I choose to stand between your greed and their survival. Hargrove laughed. Noble sentiment from a woman. With no cafe, no husband, no future. A half-breed helping savages, you belong nowhere. The words struck deep. They echoed childhood taunts. Tennessee plantation owners' dismissals. Goodwater citizens' contempt. For a moment, their weight threatened to crush her. Then she remembered her grandmother's journal. The words written in faded ink. We make our belonging by standing firm in what we believe. Thomas and the townspeople had nearly reached the canyon edge. Hargrove hadn't noticed them yet. You're wrong, Mercy said. I belong exactly where I stand, between poison and water, between hatred and hope. Hargrove's face twisted. Poetic, but ultimately futile. He raised his derringer as shouts erupted from above. Thomas and the townspeople spilled down the canyon path. Hargrove fired at the nearest explosive charge instead of Mercy. The bullet struck its mark. Nothing happened. Mercy held up severed wires. Cut the connections. Without them, the powder is just dust. Rage transformed Hargrove's features. He lunged for the detonator box several feet away. Mercy threw herself at his legs. They fell together, rolling dangerously close to the creek's edge. The eastern sky brightened, dawn approaching. Thomas and several townsmen reached the canyon floor, racing toward them. Hargrove kicked free of Mercy's grip. His hand closed around the detonator. With a triumphant snarl, he pressed the plunger down. A single charge detonated, only one she had missed. The explosion sent rock shards flying. The canyon wall groaned, then silence. Relief flooded Mercy's body. One charge wasn't enough to dam the creek or collapse the canyon. The ground shifted beneath her feet. A secondary rumble built deep in the earth. The damaged section of wall began to slide, weakened, by hidden fractures the explosion had triggered. Run! Thomas shouted. Mercy scrambled away from the collapsing rock face. Hargrove, closer to the wall, wasn't as fortunate. Stone crashed around him. He disappeared beneath a cloud of dust and debris. Water found new pathways swirling around. Fallen rock. The creek narrowed but continued flowing. Nature adapting to man's interference. Thomas helped Mercy to her feet. Are you hurt? She shook her head, searching the ridge for Little Hawk. No sign of him or Hargrove's men. Townspeople gathered around her. The blacksmith, the school teacher, even Marshal Jenkins. Their faces showed concern, respect. A shopkeeper offered his canteen. You saved our water, the blacksmith said simply. A cry came from downstream. One of the younger men pointed to a ledge where the rock slide had created a natural dam. Water pooled behind it, rising steadily. It's backing up, Jenkins observed grimly. When it breaks through, it'll flood everything downstream, including the Navajo camps, including Goodwater itself. Movement on the western ridge drew their attention. Chief Manuelito arrived with warriors. Little Hawk among them, blood staining one sleeve. He had survived the encounter with Hargrove's men. The chief assessed the situation with one sweeping glance. He spoke rapidly in Navajo. Warriors immediately descended to the creek bed. Little Hawk translated. My uncle says we must divert the water before the natural dam breaks. Create channels to carry it safely past the town and camps. The blacksmith rolled up his sleeves. We'll need every hand. For one heartbeat, townspeople and warriors regarded each other warily. Then Jenkins set down his rifle and picked up a fallen branch to use as a lever. Others followed his example. They worked as the sun climbed higher. Shoulder to shoulder, former enemies cleared channels in the creek bed. Navajo knowledge of water flow guided settler strength. Women formed bucket brigades to stem small breaches. Mercy worked alongside Little Hawk, their hands brushing occasionally as they moved stones. Neither spoke of what had passed between them in the darkness before dawn. The work said everything necessary. By midday, controlled channels directed the water safely past the debris. The immediate danger had passed. Exhausted workers rested on sun-warmed rocks, sharing water and dried meat from Navajo pouches. Thomas discovered Hargrove half buried in loose stone, alive but badly injured. The Baron refused help from Navajo hands, his hatred intact despite his broken body. "This changes nothing," he wheezed as Jenkins and two settlers carried him to a wagon. "The railroad cannot be stopped." Maybe not, Mercy thought, but it could be redirected, like the creek, made to flow with the land rather than cutting against it. She sat beside Little Hawk on a high rock overlooking the canyon. His wound had been cleaned and bound by a Navajo healer. Blood brothers now, in more than heritage. "Your cafe," he said quietly. "Ashes." She opened her grandmother's journal, letting the sun fall across pages that had survived fire and flood. But not everything burns. Little Hawk's hand found hers between them, hidden from the others below. A tenuous connection, like the first bridge across troubled water. In the canyon, townspeople and warriors continued working side by side, rebuilding what nature and man had broken. No miracle of instant brotherhood, no erasing of deep wounds, just the simple choice to face a common threat together. Mercy watched a hawk circle overhead, free, watchful, patient. Chief Manuelito climbed to where they sat. His weathered face showed lines of exhaustion, but his eyes remained clear and focused. "Hargrove will bring others," he said without preamble. "Yes," Mercy agreed. "We need a place, between your world and ours, where words can be spoken before arrows fly." The cafe had been such a place, now it was gone. Little Hawk's fingers tightened around hers. "We rebuild." 3 simple words, a declaration, a promise. A future neither of them had imagined when dawn broke that morning. The chief nodded once, his gaze taking in their clasped hands. A blessing unspoken. Below, the diverted creek found its new path, water flowing silver under the midday sun. Not the course nature had originally carved. Not the route man had tried to force. Something new. Compromised but strong. Like the hands intertwined on sun-warmed stone. 3 months passed. Like water over stone, smooth on the surface, transformative underneath. The new trading post rose at the crossroads between Goodwater and Navajo land. Not in town where old prejudices might suffocate it, not on tribal grounds where federal agents could object, but in between, on the border, in the margin where worlds met. They built it together. Townspeople contributed lumber, nails, labor. Navajo brought stone for the foundation, knowledge of where to dig the well. The building emerged from the dust with features of both cultures. Sturdy beams, rounded corners, windows facing east toward dawn. Mercy watched it take shape from her small tent nearby. Each day the structure looked more solid than her dreams had dared imagine. Each night the stars witnessed quiet conversations between her and Little Hawk as they planned what might grow from this fragile beginning. Baron Hargrove had left town on a stretcher, promising vengeance. Porter's restaurant failed after townspeople began frequenting the trading post for both goods and meals. New stories circulated, not of Mercy the outsider, but of Mercy who had saved Canyon Creek. Her grandmother's journal remained tucked beneath her pillow. Its pages spoke from the past, but the blank sheets at the back waited for a future she was just beginning to envision. The trading post opened on a clear autumn morning. Navajo blankets hung from rafters. Coffee simmered on the stove. Mercy wore the turquoise necklace, outside her dress for the first time, a declaration visible to all who entered. Miss Abigail rang the small bell Mercy had salvaged from the cafe ruins. Its clear tone carried across the sagebrush plains, calling people to a place that hadn't existed before. A place born from fire, flood, and stubborn hope. They came. Hesitantly, at first. Settlers and Navajo alike. Old enmities didn't disappear with the raising of a roof, but hunger brought them, curiosity kept them. The scent of fresh bread and the promise of fair trade proved stronger than bitter memories. Thomas helped behind the counter, his quick mind keeping track of transactions. Marshal Jenkins visited regularly, his presence a tacit endorsement. Chief Manuelito sent warriors to ensure safety, their watchful eyes less hostile with each passing. Furka. Little Hawk moved between worlds with increasing confidence. His English improved. His role expanded from translator to diplomat, bridge builder, partner. His hand found Mercy's when no one was looking, sometimes even when they were. The trading post ledger showed modest profit by winter, enough to expand the kitchen, enough to hire 2 Navajo women as permanent staff, enough to consider a future beyond survival. On the coldest night of December, seated by the fire after closing, Little Hawk took Mercy's hand formally across the table. "My uncle wishes me to bring you to the winter gathering." The flame caught red highlights in his long black hair. Shadows across features she had memorized without intending to. "As what?" she asked, her voice steady despite the quickening of her pulse. His eyes held hers. "As who you are." 3 words, 1,000 meanings. She squeezed his hand in answer. The winter gathering welcomed her with solemn dignity. Elders examined her grandmother's journal, tracing connections through shared stories. Women taught her ceremonies to honor both sides of her heritage. At night, beneath star-scattered skies, Little Hawk spoke of spring, of possibilities, of children who might carry 2 bloodlines with pride instead of shame. The days lengthened. The trading post flourished with the warming earth. A federal Indian agent arrived with the March winds, his pristine uniform stark against the desert backdrop. He carried papers stamped with government seals, orders for the Navajo to return to designated reservation lands, threats of military enforcement, promises of severe consequences for any settler who interfered. The agent stood before the trading post, reading his proclamation to the gathered crowd, his voice thin against the vastness surrounding them. "This establishment sits on federally controlled territory," he concluded. "It will be closed immediately pending investigation of illegal commerce with non-reservation Indians." Marshal Jenkins stepped forward. "This land was deeded to Miss Freeman legally. We have the paperwork." The agent's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A mistake to be rectified." Thomas moved to Mercy's side. "The railroad lost its petition for water rights. Now they try another approach." The agent consulted his papers again. "I see here a notation of Miss Freeman's questionable status." His gaze flicked to the turquoise at her throat. "Those of mixed blood fall under special regulatory consideration." The old slur wrapped in new bureaucracy. Some wounds cut fresh, even after scabbing over. Little Hawk stepped between Mercy and the agent. Chief Manuelito moved to her other side. Between them, she stood straight-backed, unflinching. "I am exactly who I am," she said clearly. "This land sits between, as do I, as does the future." The agent's nostrils flared. Poetic nonsense won't stop federal troops. Behind him, settlers murmured uncomfortably. Blacksmith, seamstress, schoolteacher, cooper, people who had broken bread at her tables, people for whom she had risked everything at Canyon Creek. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. The blacksmith stepped forward first. "She saved our water when the railroad would have poisoned it for profit." Miss Abigail joined him. "She taught our children to read alongside Navajo children." One by one, townspeople moved to stand with Mercy. No speeches, no declarations. Just bodies occupying space, making choices visible through flesh and bone. The agent's face mottled. "This borders on insurrection." Marshal Jenkins removed his badge, placed it deliberately on a trading post table. "This borders," on justice. The agent departed with threats of returning forces. No one doubted he meant them. The victory felt temporary, fragile as morning frost. That night, Chief Manuelito presented Mercy with a ceremonial blanket. Its intricate pattern told stories of earth and sky separation and connection. "For the woman between worlds," he said in Navajo, Little Hawk translating softly, "for the daughter returned, for the bridge that stands when waters rise." She wrapped it around her shoulders. The weight felt like belonging. Spring turned to summer, summer to fall. The trading post expanded. A small school took shape nearby, Miss Abigail presiding over lessons taught in 3 languages. Navajo families established seasonal camps closer to the crossroads. Settlers' children played stick games with Navajo children in the dusty yard. No federal troops appeared, not yet. Their shadow loomed over each accomplishment, each small victory of coexistence. A telegram arrived from Santa Fe. Thomas read it aloud to the gathered council of settlers and Navajo representatives. Congress had passed a limited treaty amendment. Some Navajo lands would receive formal recognition. Some water rights would be protected. Not everything they had fought for, but more than they had dared hope. That evening they celebrated around bonfires. Music from both cultures twined together beneath stars that had witnessed centuries of conflict on the land they shared. Mercy moved between groups, serving food, accepting congratulations, belonging everywhere and nowhere completely. Little Hawk found her at the edge of firelight. His hand slipped into hers with practiced ease. "The agent will return," he said, quietly, "with more papers, more men." "Yes." She leaned against his shoulder. "And we will still be here." A year passed. The crossroads settlement grew from trading post to small outpost. Some called it Freeman's Crossing. Others used the Navajo name that translated to Meeting Waters. Maps left it unnamed, an anomaly that existed despite official denial. Mercy and Little Hawk married beneath cottonwood trees at Canyon Creek. 2 ceremonies, 2 traditions, 1 union. Their small cabin near the trading post became another borderland, another bridge. On a clear morning in early spring, Mercy stepped onto the trading post porch. The bell in her hand caught sunlight as she raised it. Its familiar ring summoned people to the day's business, to coffee and conversation, to the careful work of living together. A dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Riders, many of them. Sunlight glinted off metal, buttons, rifle barrels, government, bridles. Mercy recognized the lead figure even at a distance. Hargrove, recovered, reinforced, returned with the promised vengeance. The bell continued its steady rhythm in her hand. People emerged from buildings, settlers, Navajo, children of both, all looking to her with questions in their eyes. Little Hawk appeared at her side, then Thomas, then Chief Manuelito visiting from the north. Marshal Jenkins, badge long abandoned for a blacksmith's apron. Miss Abigail with primer books clutched to her chest. The dust cloud grew larger. The sound of hoofbeats carried across the morning stillness. Mercy set down the bell, straightened her apron, touched the turquoise at her throat. Her grandmother's journal, now filled with a year of new entries, sat inside on the counter. Evidence of life continuing despite all attempts to erase it. She stepped forward alone to the edge of the porch. Behind her, the community she had helped create gathered in silent solidarity. The crossroads settlement waited between worlds, between laws, between what had been and what might yet become. The riders approached like a storm front, inevitable and threatening. Mercy lifted her chin. Her shadow stretched long across the desert sand.